let's dive into visas and residency and how you can basically unlock the world and live anywhere legally. So when we dive in, let me first quickly introduce myself. My name is Veerle. I have a background in immigration law. I studied a master's in international law and then specialized in immigration law, and basically have been working as a consultant for about 10 years in the Netherlands and in Australia, and I was helping expats with their visas. And 5 years ago, I also got certified as a travel coach, and I've been combining both. And as a travel coach, I also help people move countries and also settle into their new life abroad. And my company is called Unpack by Veer. And this all started with my own passion of travel and also living in different countries. I've lived in the Netherlands, which is where I'm originally from. And that's where I'm also based at the moment. And I've also lived in Spain, Cambodia, and Australia. And actually, today I'm tuning in from Spain. I'm in Mallorca right now, and combining, work and travel, doing the digital nomad life a little bit. And yeah, I'm really excited for this session to dive into the topic of visas, because I know it can be very overwhelming sometimes, but I want to show you that it can also be a lot easier than we often think. Because it's most people really see it as a hurdle in their process of moving countries. So I hope this session will help you to get more clarity on which visa types exists, and whether you are, for example, now dreaming of moving abroad or you are already in the planning process. This can help you to define, okay, what are the different visa types that I can even choose from, or that I perhaps not have thought about yet. And also, I want to also dive a little bit into the mindset, like, okay, how can you avoid common mistakes that often happen when we are in this visa application process, so that you can avoid those. And also to think about, okay, what are your goals, for example, and what is your vision with this visa for like perhaps a pathway towards permanent residency, for example. So we're going to dive into all of that. And the time won't allow us to dive into many different countries. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the different visa types and then just use various countries as an example, so that you have an idea of what is out there in the world. And of course, if you have any questions after this session about a specific visa or a specific country, you can always send me a message, and we can just talk about it more afterwards as well. So let's dive into the visa pathways that you can choose from, or at least what we will focus on today. And this is just an overview of the different types that we will dive into. So first of all, the digital nomad visa, which is really for remote workers and entrepreneurs who want to combine work and travel. Then the work visa, if you have a job offer or you want to get employed locally. Then the student visa, if you're thinking about studying abroad. Retirement visa, perhaps you have a passive income or savings, that could be a great option then. And the investment visa, and that's similar, like perhaps you want to invest in a different country and see what's possible. And of course, all of these visa types have their own requirements, and they're also different per country, of course. But in this session, I just want to focus on the general requirements that are mostly applicable in most situations, so that you have an idea of like, okay, if I choose this pathway, this is what I can expect for this visa type. So let's dive into the digital nomad visa first. As I said, this is ideal for remote workers, and it has really grown in popularity, especially after the pandemic. So many countries have now introduced some sort of digital nomad visa. I think there are at least 50, if not more. And basically every month another country is added to the list. And there's also a little bit of a gray area with this as well. For example, there are people who just enter a country on a tourist visa and then just, work from their hotel room, basically what I'm doing now. I mean, I'm in Europe as a European, I don't need a visa, but just this situation of just being in a hotel room, no one would know that you are working, right? So that's a bit of a gray area. But in this session today, I just want to focus on let's say the official digital nomad visas that are out there, especially for this type of scenario where you want to work abroad, like as a freelancer, for example, or as having like a foreign employer, or with your own online business, for example. And if you enjoy slow travel, and this is like has become a trend over the past few years as well. Like before, digital nomads would often just jump from one place to another every few weeks, but now more people are embracing like a slower lifestyle where they perhaps want to spend maybe 3 or 6 months in one country, or even a year. And those digital nomad visas are great for that as well. And especially if you're also looking for lifestyle flexibility, you want to take your work with you wherever you go, and you want to be location independent. So let's look at the general requirements for the digital nomad visas. And first of all, one of the most important things is that you have remote work or that you are self-employed, which means that you cannot have like local employment. So you really have to have like a foreign employer with like a minimum monthly income, and that you can prove that, or that you are self-employed and, for example, have like an online business or have like international clients. So the most important thing is that there's not a connection with the country you are moving to. And then, as I said, there's this minimum monthly income requirement, which is usually in general between like 2,000 to 400 like euros or dollars. And another requirement that is usually required is that you have valid health insurance, so that you can take care of yourself when, or if anything happens, and also that you do not have a criminal record. And those requirements are basically to make sure that you are not a burden on the system there. And of course, yeah, like for the general safety, like that would be one of the checks as well, of course. So one of the examples of countries with a digital nomad visa, which is quite popular, is Costa Rica. And there you must have at least about $3,000 of income every month and be able to prove that. Or if you come with like a family, you would need about $4,000. And if with this visa, you can stay up to 1 year, and then you're also allowed to renew it. But as I said before, you are not allowed to have like local employment. Another option that I mentioned here, which is also popular in Europe, is Spain. And there you must have at least almost 3,000 euros, like 2,700 or so per month as well. And then you also get a visa for 1 year that you can renew every year. And after 5 years, this could actually lead to a pathway of permanent residency. And this is quite interesting for people who want to perhaps eventually settle in Europe. This could be a great pathway towards that, because most digital nomad visas actually do not have this pathway to permanent residency. Most countries just offer maybe a 1 year visa, or maybe you can renew it once. So you could stay somewhere for 2 years, but it's still a temporary visa. It doesn't grant you like a PR afterwards. And another example that I mentioned here is the Philippines. So they actually recently introduced a digital nomad visa. So that's why I thought it would be good to mention this. Perhaps you hadn't heard about it yet. And this one is also for 12 months and can be renewed afterwards as well. And yeah, like as I said before, digital nomad visas are really a great option if you are thinking about location independence, and perhaps you are already working remotely, or you have an online business, and then this just means that you can take your work with you wherever you go, basically, and have this slow travel experience that I mentioned. I'm just going to quickly check in the chat if there is anything No, everything is working fine. Okay, that's great. And I just continue with the next category, which is the work visas. And this visa is ideal if you're actually not working remotely, but you are you have like an in-demand skill, for example, or you are like highly qualified. That's usually what these work visas are for. And for example, skills that are really in demand, or a profession that is in demand. And this visa is specifically for people who want to work for a local employer. And usually this visa type also gives you more stronger pathways to permanent residency, because of course many countries want these highly skilled people to stay in the country. So usually after a couple of years, there's an easier pathway to apply for permanent residency. And here also the requirements are different per country, but I'm going to mention the general requirements for you so that you have an idea of what it's usually about. So first of all, one of the general requirements is a job offer or a nomination by an employer. So this means that while you are still in the country you are at right now, you have a job offer from the country you want to move to, and then you can apply for the visa. And sometimes this is a nomination by an employer. In some options, it can also be by the government, so that they sort of give you an invitation to apply for a visa. And this is usually the case when you have like a skill or a profession that is really in demand. So they want more people to come to that country to work in that profession. Another general requirement is then to have qualifications in this high demand profession. So, for example, that you have like a master's degree or like a diploma, depending, of course, on the profession, what they ask for. But that's usually something you would need to show for this visa type. And then there are also health and police checks. What often happens, what I've also experienced myself with the police checks, is that they might ask for this for all the countries you have lived in for the past 10 years. So it can be quite, an extensive process if you have moved around. And then it's usually you have to have lived in that country for at least a year. So not if you're traveling around that you would need police checks for all those countries, but really the countries where you have really lived for a certain amount of time. So, getting those documents ready can be sometimes quite a bit of a process. And another thing that is often asked, depending on the country you want to move to, is that you prove that you are proficient in the language of that country. So, for example, in my case, when I moved to Australia, I had to do an English language test, and that's something you would do before you can apply for the visa. So it's proof that you have to add to the application process. So depending on where you would move to, those are some things to keep in mind that might show up. For example, also what I haven't mentioned yet, the health check. This would mean that you would need to get a medical certificate that proves that you are healthy. And this is also for the country to make sure that you do not become like a burden on their system, basically. And this also depends on the country, of course, how strict this is. But it's good to know that those type of documents might be required if you choose this route. So the options the examples that I've mentioned here are Australia and the Netherlands. Also, from my own experience, I thought it would be nice to add those. So in Australia, you have the option of the 482 visa, which is basically a visa that is sponsored by the employer. So they would actually apply for the visa for you. And what I just said, you have like a language test, a health check, you have to prove your qualifications. And what is also important is that your profession is mentioned on a list. They have like different types of lists with professions. And if that profession is mentioned on the list, you would be able to apply for this visa type. And those lists are updated every year. So it's good to just check if, for example, your profession or the job you want to work in is mentioned on that list, which means that you could apply for this visa. And for Australia, what is nice with this type of visa is that after 2 years, you could already apply for permanent residency. And this would also be sponsored by your employer. And then after another 2 years, you would actually have your permanent residency. So a process of 4 years of working, being sponsored by an employer, would already grant you the permanent residency. So it's quite a quick process. And then for the Netherlands, one of the most popular visas there for like work is a highly skilled migrant visa. And basically how it works there is that you have to comply with a minimum salary threshold. So basically, if you earn at least that minimum, if that's what's mentioned in your employment contract with your new employer in the Netherlands, then that would be basically sufficient to apply for that visa. And then also that company would sponsor your visa as well. And this would eventually, could possibly lead to permanent residency after 5 years. And of course, if you have a permanent residency, you would also be able to travel through Europe. So it's always like if you have like permanent residency in one of the European countries, it just sort of opens up your like the area basically for you to live and work. So that's of course an extra benefit as well. So the next category is the student visa, and I think that speaks for itself. It's for you if you want to study abroad, and often this also leads to permanent residency, or at least a pathway. So it could be an interesting option for you if you want to, get more education and potentially also stay in that country a little bit longer, or really move there permanently. So the general requirements for this one is that you need to be admitted to a recognized institution. So you first would need to get this admission from, for example, the university before you could apply for the visa. And with this visa application, you also need to prove that you have enough financial means so that you can really support yourself while you are studying, because you are not allowed to work full-time during your studies. In most countries, only part-time work is allowed. And in some countries, for example, one of the countries I mentioned here in Germany, you are allowed to usually work part-time while you're studying, and then during the holidays, you can work full-time. So it's good to check those type of requirements as well for the country you want to move to, so that you can look at your finances as well and be like, okay, I can work part-time, or that's not allowed, so I need to create some sort of buffer while I'm studying. And this visa application, depending on the country, you can apply it via an embassy or often online as well. And in some cases, also the university can apply for you and can really help you with the process. So that would make it even easier. So yeah, as I said, like the country examples, like first of all, Germany. So most public universities in Germany are tuition free, but you would need to prove that you have about 12,000 euros per year in a blocked account. So that's sort of the requirement that they ask for to prove that you have enough funds to support yourself. And you, as I said, you can work part-time as well. And after your studies, you can also stay for 18 months, like after your graduation, to look for work. And eventually, that's also a pathway towards a permanent residency, if that's something you're interested in. And then for Canada, it's basically similar requirements. You also need to prove that you have enough funds to support yourself, which is about 21,000 Canadian dollars per year. And it allows you to, the student visa allows you to also work up to 20 hours per week. So that's also something that's interesting to consider. And previously you were allowed to have a dependent, like a partner on your student visa in Canada, but unfortunately that has changed. So that's not possible anymore. So now this student visa is really just for yourself. So if you want to move together, you also have to think about those type of things, so that you make sure that, if you have a partner, that you can both have a different visa. So yeah, I think that's a bit in general about this visa type. Also, given the time, let's move on a little bit. So the next one is the retirement visas, and this is like an ideal long-term option for people who have like a stable passive income or perhaps savings, and they're looking for like perhaps a more relaxing and environment to retire, right? To have a better quality of life. So the general requirements are that most countries have some sort of age limit. For example, one of the countries that I've mentioned here, Thailand, has an age limit of 50 plus. Another requirement is that you need to have some sort of passive income or like proof of savings, because you're not allowed to work on this retirement visa. So it's really, you just have to show that you can support yourself, and also that you have health insurance. So, for example, for Mexico, you can qualify for this visa no matter what your age is. So, even often, for example, expats do this already. They apply for this visa, for example, because they have enough passive income or they have enough savings, even though they haven't, reached a certain age yet. But just to have this visa to, spend more time there. And just to give you an idea, in Mexico, you need to have about 230,000 USD in your savings account to be able to apply for this visa. As I said, for Thailand, there's the age requirement of 50 plus. And there you would need to have like a bank balance of about 22,000 USD. So it's quite a difference in between the countries. So that's also maybe something you can consider when you're looking at different options. But I will talk a little bit more about that after these visa types, like how you can make a decision of where to go or which visa type would be best for you. Another popular option is Panama. There's also like a popular program for retirement visas. And there you would need to have at least 1,000 USD per month, for example, in like a pension or some form of passive income. Or if it's a bit lower, you could do like 750 USD, but then also have like a real estate investment of a minimum of 100,000 USD. So there are like different options depending on your situation as well. All right. So the last category that we're going to dive into is the investment visas. And this is really ideal if you are an entrepreneur or an investor or freelancer, or perhaps you want to start a business or invest in a business. And this is really a visa that is built when you have like long-term global plans. So let's have a look at the general requirements. So usually you need a business plan or an investment that qualifies. And that's really about like having a minimum capital. And this really depends on the country, how high the investment should be. And often this investment is also linked to that it should benefit the country you want to move to. So you would need to, for example, in your business plan, prove that it would benefit the country. And this really depends on the country what sort of the requirements are for this proof or how much the investment should be. So I just mentioned two examples here that are quite popular. The first one is Portugal. And in the past, you could invest in real estate to get this golden visa, is what it's called. But that's not possible anymore in Portugal. But it's still possible to invest, and you can, for example, invest in cultural projects, and the investment should be at least 250,000 euros, or invest about 500,000 euros at least in like scientific research. So there are different categories, and depending on the category, you would need a certain amount of money. And if you maintain this investment for at least 5 years, you can hold this golden visa, and eventually then you could turn this into permanent residency as well. and eventually even apply to become a Portuguese citizen, if that's really what you would want for the future. And of course, that opens up what I said before, the opportunity to, live and work wherever you want in the European Union. So it's definitely an interesting option if that's something you would want to consider for the long term. And Greece also has this golden visa. The investment is a bit different there, but you can invest in real estate. So that could be an interesting option. And this starts as low as 250,000 euros for an investment in like less populated areas. But if you go to a very popular area, like for example, Santorini, that would go up to 800,000 euros as well. But the good thing about this visa is that you can also include your family. So they would also get the visa. And actually, you don't really need to live there. So if you just want to invest, that's possible too. They just want you to be present, like that you visit the country during the application process, but it doesn't really matter if you're there afterwards. So that could be interesting as well. So now that we looked at different visa types, I want to make sure you don't get overwhelmed, and I want to add this to give you some more clarity about how you can actually do this research. Because of course now we have this general overview, and you've heard a bit about different countries to just give you an idea of like, okay, what's out there. But then actually, how can you do your research and apply for a visa without getting overwhelmed or stressed, right? So there are different ways to approach this. Like, for example, one way to do it is that you can focus on your goals. So you can think about, okay, if your goal is to study, for example, then you can say, okay, I want to study. Which country would be the best option for me? Or if you want to invest, okay, that's my goal, right? Then you're very specific about the goal. But you could also flip it around and think about, okay, I want to move to a certain country. So then you would first focus on the country and then think about, okay, if I want to move to this specific country, what are the visa options for me? And then look at the different visa options and then consider, okay, do I want to work there or study or invest, and sort of approach it in that way. So you can, look at the preferences for different countries or for different lifestyle, depending on what your goals are. And here I put down some questions you can ask yourself to make this easier to define your visa options. So first of all, really think about this goal. Like, okay, do I want to work? Do I want to study? Do I want to retire? Do I want to invest or run a business? Like, what do I actually want to do, right? That's a very important question to ask yourself, because that really, depends on which visa options are possible for you then. And another important one is, okay, what's my timeline? Do I just want a short-term change, like just a change of scenery, like, for example, like a digital nomad type of visa? Or am I really looking for like a long-term vision? Do I want to, find a pathway to permanent residency? Then another question you can ask yourself is like, okay, what's my budget? Like, do I need income? So do I want to look for a job there? Or, do I have savings? Like, what is the budget, right? And also, for example, something to consider, like, okay, are the costs of living in that country higher or lower than where I'm currently at? And then the last question you can also ask yourself that can be helpful to define your visa option is the duration. Like, okay, are you looking for temporary stay or permanent residency? So those are like at least the main questions you can ask yourself to help you define this, right? So just to make it a little bit still easier for you and to give this overview, here are sort of the steps you can walk through when you are going through this process to really turn that vision that you have into reality. So the first step would be to really do your research and to look for accurate information. And what I mean with that is to start with official websites, like government websites. Most countries have like websites specifically about immigration, so start there and see what's there. That's usually more helpful than looking at Facebook or blogs because that's usually, people giving advice based on their situation, but it doesn't mean that it also applies to your situation. Or perhaps that information is already outdated, because often like visa processes or visa types change all the time as well with those requirements. For example, what I mentioned before with like professions that are in demand or not. So it's good to just start with the official sources. And then the second step is to create an overview and just put everything down in a spreadsheet to compare all the requirements and all the timelines. This really helps to avoid overwhelm. Then the third step is to ask yourself, okay, can I do this myself? Can I apply for this visa myself? Is it like a simple process that I can just do online and just upload the documents and, that's it? Or do I actually need professional support because this is a more complicated process, or I have questions and I'm not really sure I can do this myself? And then like the fourth step is basically to get started, start the process. Once you have, once you get clarity on all those three steps, then you're ready to get started. But it's important to also avoid these common mistakes. And I wanted to add this because it happens quite often. So if you are aware of it, you can make sure you avoid it. So the first one, of course, I know it sounds logical, but it's good to be aware of it, right? So to make sure that you do not like provide outdated or wrong information, really just double check everything, because that can really, if there's something incorrect, it can really delay the process, or eventually if you really provide wrong information, right, then it might even lead to a rejection. So just be honest in the process. And also the second point, like make sure that everything is complete and that you don't provide incorrect information. And with that, it's also important to make sure you don't overlook smaller requirements. And what I mean with that is, for example, like a health check, or perhaps you need a translation of a document. And those are like often things that are overlooked because they're just a bit smaller than like the bigger requirements that are asked for, but they're still equally important, because if that's missing, it might, as I said, might delay the process. And also the fourth one that I put on the slide, like unaligned timelines. What I mean with that is that it's really good to know before you start how long the process is going to take, at least an estimate. Of course, you never know exactly how long, but you don't want to apply for a visa and then get stuck in this limbo and realize, oh, this might take a year, because that sometimes happens in some countries. Like some visa types are so popular and so many people apply to move somewhere, and then it might just be that maybe the procedure is just on hold, or it can literally take 1 or 2 years before you get an answer. And if you don't know that up front, then you're literally stuck in this limbo. So make sure you check that as well. So I hope this, I know we got a little bit over time, but we also started a little bit later. So again, thank you for your patience. And I really hope this gave you a bit more clarity about, how it works with visas, what are the different options, and how can you avoid common mistakes, for example, and make sure the process is less stressful and less overwhelming. So I did prepare like a free visa preparation guide for you, which you can access if you scan the QR code. And it basically helps you to just read through whatever we discussed today as well. And I've added some extra information about sort of how the process works once you apply for a visa. And, it can help you to get started as well. So feel free to check that out. And of course, let me know if you have any questions. And just to recap what I spoke about today, first of all, there's no one size fits all. There's so many different types. And besides that, it depends on, what is the lifestyle you want? What are your goals? What is your age? What is your profession or your skills or your budget, right? Like there's so many different factors. So really look at what is applicable for you. What is the best visa for you, for your situation? And then start clarifying your vision and really look at those goals so that you find something that really aligns with the life you want, or like the country you want to move to. And then, of course, start in your research with the official sources and stay organized in the process. So create an overview for yourself, and yeah, make sure, like, that just helps so much with overwhelm because there's so much information. Just put the timelines there, the different visa types, the requirements, so you really have everything on track. And that also helps you to plan ahead and be aware of the different timelines. And if all of this, or if you're in the process and you feel like, okay, this is too much to figure out, or it just gets complicated, don't hesitate to ask for help. Get expert support, and get like a specialist who understands exactly what is needed for the process you're thinking about, or perhaps there are different options that you haven't thought about yourself that could be possible as well. So have a look at that as well. And to wrap this up, let's stay connected. I would love to connect, and if you have any questions, as I said in the beginning, maybe there's like a question about a certain visa type or country that I haven't mentioned, feel free to reach out to me. I always love to connect and also hear about your plans and where you're thinking about moving to. And perhaps if there's anything I can support you with, I'm happy to, of course, discuss how we can work together to make that move abroad happen for you. And yeah, I think that's it. I'm going to look at the chat and see if there are any questions. And if not, then we can just wrap up. I think I can stop sharing my screen now. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, or if you're watching the replay, for watching. And as I said, if you have any questions, feel free to connect. And also thank you for the organizers for inviting me. And yeah, I wish you a beautiful rest of your day.
So much. That was so helpful and wonderful. Definitely access those resources, y'all. And of course, we will make sure that you get access to them after. This was invaluable. Enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your weekend. Have a wonderful time.
Bye.